From champion WNBA player to experienced business executive, Monica Wright Rogers is making her mark in Toronto as the first general manager of the Toronto Tempo. And I'm so excited I get to speak with her today. Monica, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me, what has it been like, first week on the job?
It's been a whirlwind, and in a positive way. I've been introduced to the sports world here in Toronto and across Canada, and I've felt nothing but warmth, enthusiasm, and excitement for this team. I'm very excited. I wish I could sign a player tomorrow because of what I've witnessed and felt during my first week here in Toronto.
So you also played in the WNBA and won 2 championships. Can you take us back to the beginning of your journey?
I went to the University of Virginia where, I was pretty highly heralded, but our team was not like a top team in the NCAA. So me getting drafted number 2 overall was not really a surprise, but it was really unlikely just because I didn't come from a UConn or a Tennessee or a Stanford. And so going through that process, just knowing what it took to get there, and then, being in the WNBA, playing for Minnesota with a new coach, and the next year winning a championship and then winning a championship again in my 4th year in the league, I really just was fortunate. I was fortunate to be on a great team with great teammates, with a great coach who now is, going to be a Hall of Fame coach, was our Olympic coach and everything. So I really bottled that experience. And, that experience really changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my career.
Yeah, you talk a lot about all the different hats that you've worn and the experiences that you've had. So how important were gaining all those skill sets to sort of take you throughout your career and where you are now?
Really important, I think vital in creating a versatile toolkit and skill set as a professional. I've taken so many vertical leaps and, like you said, worn so many hats that there isn't probably one role in the basketball operations organization that I have not done. And so that gives me a huge advantage of just knowing how the operation works, knowing what it takes to have a successful organization.
And you spent 2 seasons with the Phoenix Mercury as an assistant GM. So what drew you to coming to Toronto to want to take on helping to build the Tempo from the ground up?
Well, first and foremost, being a GM in this league was always the dream. But then as I started to learn more about Toronto, when I started to learn more about the leadership group, and then of course, Teresa, I just knew that this would be a great fit for me and who I was as a person. We are aligned on core values. We all want the same things. And we just really embody what it takes to really make change in this league and get it to a place where we think that we're equitable.
And for those who don't know sort of day-to-day what a GM does, can you talk a little bit about that? So what does the day-to-day look like for you?
Well, right now, I'm really in the process of building a staff. So I would love to build out my front office. And obviously that requires a little bit more admin and of drawing up job descriptions, talking with the team to understand, the roles and the organizational chart. Also interviewing folks, getting out there and understanding what talent is out there and what I want to bring into this franchise. So it's a lot like scouting, but in an off-court sense. Then that entails signing players and obviously relationships with agents and relationships with other GMs and all the little things that you see come through on the WNBA transactions website is a large part of my job once that foundation is laid.
Talking about talent, 135 Canadian women are playing in NCAA women's basketball this season. So speak about the talent that's coming from the Canadian women's basketball system and its impact on future draft prospects.
I'm enormously excited about the talent coming out of Canada. I remember when I was a college coach coming to Toronto and recruiting at Crestwood Prep and watching practice and driving to Ottawa and watching Capitol Courts practice. And there was like a ton of girls playing. I was blown away by how high a level that they were playing at. And I think that number will continue to grow. I also think the number of Canadian players in the WNBA and NBA will continue to grow. So I'm enormously excited. And to answer the last part of your question, I think the tempo will hugely affect the participation of young in women's basketball and sports overall across Canada, knowing that they could one day play for their home country's WNBA team.
So how important are leagues like Unrivaled and Athletes Unlimited to the growth of women's basketball?
I've experienced Unrivaled live. I've experienced Athletes Unlimited live. And, just from the W side, I appreciate, just from a scouting perspective, being able to go into those tournaments and see players that, will likely be playing in the WNBA live in a different type of setting. Number one, I think it gives another element of player development in the W off season that they may not get otherwise. I think it tremendously pushes basketball forward. I'm enjoying just being able to watch it, Unrivaled and Athletes Unlimited here at home. And I'm excited for the future of where both of those leagues go.
Now, Toronto, as we mentioned before, is one of the most multicultural cities in the world. I know you have family ties to the U.S. Virgin Islands. How important is it for you to live somewhere where there's that connection to the Caribbean diaspora? And also, has anyone invited you to Caribana yet?
Oh, you did your homework. No, I have not. I've heard all about it, though. People have already mentioned it to me and said it's a phenomenal time to just celebrate the Caribbean heritage. I knew a little bit about that being a part of Toronto's culture, and it excites me, obviously, because of the food I'll be able to try coming to a city that has such a diverse makeup and just, very inclusive in that way. So yeah, it wasn't my final decision maker factor, but it did play a role in helping me understand what Toronto's culture is like and how much fun we would have as a family while moving and transitioning here.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share with fans or viewers or the Toronto community or Canadian community about, your role or, what's to come next with the Tempo?
Well, I want fans to continue to stay engaged, so I will encourage them to definitely follow Tempo on all social media platforms. They're able to buy gear now online, so please, log on and get your gear ASAP. And then I would love for them to just take a look at the WNBA this season. Watch as much as you can.
That's great. Thanks so much for chatting with us, Monica.
Thanks for having me.
And I should say, go Tempo.
Go Tempo.